I think this was on purpose to get rid of the old guard and bring in the new with the defunding the police movement. Do you think there was a deeper agenda than
There's always an agenda. I mean, throughout the history of this country, there has always been an agenda to get rid of the old. The younger generation always wants to take over. Okay, they always, the older generation, they're dinosaurs. Their thinking is in the past. We know better than them. We need to push them out so we can get, the next generation of generals. I think that's a constant throughout history. Is this perhaps one tactic that was used? Sure. To a certain extent, it probably did work in getting a lot of people up. But then the fact that we're now asking those exact same people to volunteer to come back might be an indication that as much as politicians refuse to ever admit that they made a mistake or they're wrong about something, maybe they're trying to correct it in a way that doesn't require them to actually make any admissions. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. It's throughout the history of this country, throughout the history of the world, it's been a pendulum where you swing too far over to one side, you get abuse, correction, overcorrection, abuse, correction, overcorrection. And it has been that way throughout history. And so, were things way too far over at the time when, NCIS, then called NIS, the Admiral's Gestapo, went out to frame people for being gay so that they could get rid of them? Yeah, that was way too far over here. Have we now swung way too far over here to where we're foregoing marksmanship training in favor of, pronoun training? Probably. Where is the right place? Right in the middle. But how do you get the pendulum to stop? Because once it starts swinging this way...
Where do you think, that brings us into the divisiveness in this country. And it's so bad. It's so bad. I don't even... it's been going on for years now, and years, and it still has not registered 100% in my head, because I constantly think, how did we get here? Is this really as bad as it sounds? Is this real? Am I really seeing what I'm seeing? And it just seems to be getting worse. And I feel like I'm pretty center. I'm not. I don't have. At least I don't feel like I have extreme views. And
I do. I'm an extreme moderate.
But I guess what I'm saying is, I see it swinging. Where did it start? Where did the pendulum start to get out of control?
Honestly, probably back in 1776. Or before. Look all the way back to the beginning. Okay? The Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Ben Franklin. Set Ben Franklin to the side for a minute. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were allies, very close friends in the fight for independence and to convince the Continental Congress to vote for the Declaration of Independence. Their interests were perfectly aligned. And then we fought a war. And after the war was over, one of the interesting things not a lot of people realize about the Revolutionary War, at the end of that war, we all of a sudden were sitting there like, okay, we don't have a king. Now what? Nobody had a plan. Nobody had an idea of what do we want to create in its place. And so that's when the debate started. And John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, these close allies, became polar opposites because they each had very different ideas of how this country should be governed. They didn't speak for years. Thomas Jefferson was John Adams' vice president, Because back then, the way it worked is you have a presidential election, the first place winner gets the presidency, second place winner gets the vice presidency. And they fought and they didn't speak for years after that because they just had very different ideas. They both knew they didn't want a king. They didn't know what they did want. And that divisiveness, the only president we've ever had that's not been a member of a political party is George Washington. After him, it split into the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. John Adams on the Federalist side, Jefferson on the Democratic Republican side. And that began this partisanship and the fighting back and forth that has continued throughout history. The parties have changed. So, the way that you currently have Democrats and Republicans, I can't, necessarily point to, well, this one was derived from Federalists, this one was from Democratic Republicans, because different issues, they move around, and sometimes parties disappear and new ones pop up. But it started then. And are we divisive today? Yes. Does it seem as bad as it's ever been? Yes. And a lot of that is because the prevalence of the media. However, is this the worst it's ever been? Well, half the states aren't putting on gray coats and picking up rifles to shoot at the other half of the states that are wearing blue coats. Mm-hmm. So we're not there. And I think that it looks a lot worse than we think it is because of the way that the media and social media portrays it. Because ultimately, divisiveness gets you more clicks and more likes and more comments than a message of unity.
And you think this goes all the way up to the president, worried about clicks and likes?
Yeah, absolutely. It starts there. Because why does the president want clicks and likes? He wants votes. And if you look at the way that a lot of these presidential elections are running today, they're not appealing to the undecided voters. They're appealing to the base because presidential elections are now, by and large, decided by whose base goes to the polls. Who's more excited to go and vote?